Hi everyone, I am AJ Hebb and I am here with my friend Jackson to talk about a movie.
Hello.
Jackson, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
I guess I can. My name is Jackson. I am a voice actor and a writer. Uh, I love movies. I love musicals. And I have thoughts about Dear Evan Hansen.
Don't we all? I promise you viewers, we do watch good movies. I just realized how frequent my collabs with the Star Avengers involved bad 2021 movies. So I swear we watch good movies.
I mean,
It
it's
just
really only because we only watch bad movies together. I don't remember the last time any of us did a sync viewing of a good movie.
yeah.
Because we see a bad movie and we're like, oh, we gotta watch that.
All right. So I guess the first question, do you have like a history on Dear Evan Hansen from the Broadway show or even like your history of Broadway shows in general?
Um, I have very little history with Dear Evan Hansen as a show. I do enjoy Broadway musicals a lot. It's not something that I'm like super passionate about, but I do enjoy them. And it was back when Dear Evan Hansen came out. That was also around the same time I was starting to get into it because of the big one, Hamilton. Um, and I listened to the first song from Dear Evan Hansen and was like, okay. I remember listening to it and thinking, I can't just listen to this. I have to actually see it. At that point, I did not know what Dear Evan Hansen was about. I did not know what Dear Evan Hansen was about until this year when the trailers started coming up, and I'm like, there is no way they made this. And then my friend told me about certain events in it, and I was like, there is no way they made this. And it was super popular. It's crazy.
I mean, yeah, I guess like the same way as like I only knew it was a very popular Broadway show, and I've only heard one song from the soundtrack, which was "Waving Through the Window." I just loved listening to it. But then I don't remember when I heard about the movie being made, but I didn't really have much thoughts about it because I was like, I haven't seen the show. I did not really look into the story, so I kind of went into this blind.
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
For
you said that.
reference, for the viewers, me and one of our other friends, Jay, who have you had Jay on your channel before? I don't remember. No.
No, I haven't gotten in on
Well, you have to at some point. But yeah, no, it was me and him who set up the viewing party that we did for this movie. And then AJ just decided to join us not knowing anything. I'm like, I am so sorry. But also I didn't tell her anything because it was funny.
Yeah, I was gonna say you say sorry in a apologetic way now, but you didn't that night.
Absolutely
You
not.
were like,
Well, that was because we hadn't watched it yet. Yeah.
so that brings us to our first question. Could you summarize to viewers who don't know about this what this movie is about?
Okay, before I do this, I would like to give a brief content warning for suicide. Uh, Dear Evan Hansen, for some ungodly reason, is about a 27-year-old man posing as a high schooler. Not really, but that's what it looks like. Named Evan Hansen, played by 27-year-old Ben Platt, uh, who is a social outcast. He's very awkward. He's wearing a cast in the movie. And there's also this other, or more importantly, for the movie's sake, based on what we saw, there's this girl that he's crushing on named Zoe. Now, Zoe's brother is named Connor. He runs into Connor at one point randomly. Connor signs his cast. Then they have a misunderstanding over a letter that Evan had written to himself as a therapy assignment. Connor thought it was making fun of him, making fun of Connor because it mentioned Zoe once or twice in it. So Connor ran off, real upset, had the letter with him, and then committed suicide that same night. And the family found the letter and thought that Evan was his like only friend, and they thought Connor had written his suicide note to Evan, and then Evan went
Yeah.
along with it.
Oh, okay. Are there any pros to what we watched?
The songs, with the exception of the content within them, are bops. They're really fun. They're good. I'd listen to the soundtrack. It has a good cast with the exception of the lead character. It ends. That's about it.
My pros are basically the same as yours, is that the songs are good. There's just one con that I'll get into that kind of messes with them.
Mhm.
And the cast did with what they were given. And now our first issue, which you pretty much brought up, is Ben Platt being casted as Evan Hansen.
I know he would rail against this. I know he disagrees. But it was nepotism. It was.
Yeah, and were you the one who brought up how he basically used the cast of Grease for the example? I can't remember. Or was it Jay?
Um, I didn't. I don't think. I think that was Jay.
Apparently, Ben Platt's defense on being casted in as a high school role was that look at the cast of Grease. They were all adults playing high schoolers. That was a common thing when it came to movies. We're in 2021. We have now acknowledged that issue. And we should be making more movies that has of their appropriate age.
Exactly. I mean, the precedent has been set for that. And it also doesn't help. And I think what helps something like Grease, or what also always comes to mind for me is the original Spider-Man film. Everyone in the high school looks like adults because they cast everyone that way. That is not the case here. You know, I get that Caitlin Dever, when filming, was 23 years old, sure, but with the context of the movie and the way they framed her, she seemed like a minor. Ben Platt never did. Looks like a 27-year-old man, because he is.
And I mean, and I don't blame him for, looking his age,
I
but
do. No.
oh, you do.
How
But
dare you?
like, he should he should have that in mind. Like, hey, I don't look as young as I used to be. Maybe somebody younger should be casted for the movie,
I mean, it would have been the same thing if Lin-Manuel Miranda, when they were making In the Heights, was like, hey, I'm still going to play Usnavi. It wouldn't have
right?
worked. And that's why he didn't, and he gave it to Anthony Ramos. Like, he still had a small part and gave himself a solo, but that's beside the point. Ben Platt could have easily, because if I'm not, he created this character, he helped create it. He was originally in the Broadway show, but it's too little too late for the movie. He should have had a small role at best.
Ben Platt, I have nothing against you except for being a part of this movie. uh, and again, yeah, there's other cast members who I really like or got to know, but their characters
Right.
are not that great. For example, we got Amy Adams. Loved her in Enchanted. I loved her singing, but the role of the mother here, I'm just like, you should have done better parenting when it came to Connor.
It is that, like, interesting thing, because there are plenty of stories where everybody is toxic and they work because of how the toxicity is framed. It does not work here, and yet everybody, with the exception of maybe Zoe, is incredibly toxic. And that's not me just saying that because I love Caitlin Dever. I genuinely think that Zoe is like the one person who like isn't incredibly toxic throughout the entire story. Um, Everybody else, however, most certainly is. And I'm not sure how it's supposed to be framed.
Yeah, and I would say the most toxic character, at least to me, because of what she has said, would definitely have to be Julianne Moore's character as Evan's
Yes.
mom.
Well, I was specifically thinking, like, I know exactly the scene you're talking about. Can we talk spoilers?
Go ahead. I feel like
Okay, specifically, I know the scene that you're talking about is when they're talking about how he missed one therapy session and she yells at him, "That's not free." I know exactly what this. Yep. And then later on, she like fully rejects the help of others to help them out financially. Like it. The problem is how much of that stuff is thrown into the story and into the movie without much care or nuance given to it, because it doesn't fully explore any of those ideas within these characters. because it doesn't have the time, and it doesn't seem interested in that.
I completely agree. Like, the problem was Julianne Moore's character was saying these harsh things, yet they made it seem like, oh, she didn't mean it. Like, because she didn't apologize for what she said for most sometimes. Like,
I know she apologized for the therapy comment. I remember her character did apologize for that. But actions speak louder than words, and she continued to be toxic throughout the rest of the movie.
I feel like if she was more, if we got to see her more like stressed out about their financial issues or like how this affects her mentally, then those harsh words would be more like effective, like more expected. No, they kept playing her like, oh, she's trying to be the nice mom.
It's what it seems like to me is it was trying to be a little bit too much from there, because usually when you have those supplemental supporting characters, you've got to have them support the main story and main ideas and themes being presented. But her story doesn't. It feels like an entirely separate story that isn't explored.
I was gonna say, yeah, like the best friend when he first meets Evan, it's like he wanted nothing to do with him. And like Evan is like, hey, you're my only friend. And the friend goes, no, we're only family friends. I don't need to hang out with you.
It's different, yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I would not want to hang out with that person.
It doesn't help that they lean so much in with that character. And for a show that is like put up on this progressive pedestal every now and again, they really leaned into the gay best friend trope and blatant casual homophobia every now and again.
Exactly. And how did you feel about the transitions into the songs?
I don't think there were any, is the thing. And I mentioned this while we were watching it. Because usually what musicals, specifically cinematic musicals will do is they will either have a little overlay track playing in the background as the characters are talking for like a little bit of time. As it rises, the tempo goes up, the beat rises, that kind of thing. Or they'll change the cinematic style, like the speed of the camera movements, the cuts, that kind of thing. They'll add some flair to it. There was none of that here. Because like what that does in other musicals is transitions you from the normalcy, the reality, into the fantastical of the musical side of things. This one stays so much in the reality. It is so jarring when he just randomly starts singing during a very important moment.
The amount of times all of us kept saying, stop singing.
Please stop,
Maybe
sir.
like more than 100.
Well, and I really don't think it also helps that even once we go into cutting right into the fantasy of, by the way, I would like to mention that my Skype is being super weird, so if I'm cutting you off a lot, that is why. I swear I'm not trying to be rude. My Skype is being so weird. But with like the fantasy of the musical side of things, we said that one of my friends said this in another chat that I was talking with while we were watching it. And then we kind of just reiterated it. It's shot like a crime drama the entire time.
When you said that during the viewing, that changed my perspective because you were right. It is shot like that. Oh my gosh. All right. Another con that I had with this movie, I only got through an hour of this movie before I gave my rating because they did something bad.
I think we were like 20 to 30 minutes in, and you had sent us your review with half a star.
Either way, we weren't even halfway through. They did something that kind of set me off. My great-grandfather, he committed suicide. When I found out when I was older, my heart kind of broke, and it made me want to connect with others who were struggling with mental health. I even had one encounter with someone who's struggling that kind of stuck with me. So when movies like Dear Evan Hansen, subjects like this in this kind of way, it ticks me off because we're not learning about Connor who gave up his life. We are learning about how Evan, who basically lies to everyone about how he knew Connor, which I would understand because like that could be a good character flaw, but they kind of like he allows this to happen. Like he made it seem like it was a good thing for a while.
It's interesting. Well, like I remember some of my friends who are more familiar with the musical as well have brought this up, and they're very critical of it usually. How what's problematic about the way this story is presented is like very initially, Evan is only doing it to help the grieving parents and grieving family, and then he continues to abuse that, seemingly without any sympathy. Like you can tell he knows it's wrong, but he doesn't admit to anything. He is willing to take their money, which the mom should have been okay with that because she didn't know the situation. Connor should not have been okay with that because he did know the situation. Everyone sucks. The world's a nightmare. But with that, he doesn't admit to anything. Even when he's confronted and asked about it, he still lies and sends someone the private note. And then that spirals until he finally tells the truth. Which, for reference, this is after he's dating the dead kid's sister, as she is regularly called.
Definitely the scene that actually broke me, and I'm sure Jackson will remember when I say it, was when they sang the song, what was it? Sincerely Me?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, 100%.
Because how they presented that song. As soon as Connor showed up happy, saying the words that the best friend were saying, I felt disgusting.
It was
Like,
it was gross framing. And they did that multiple times. It wasn't even just in Sincerely Me. It was like towards the end of the film even. When like Evan was singing about something. I don't remember. And they showed a fake flashback to him meeting Connor at some point and in an event that we had seen before, and that never actually happened. And it was a weird way to frame this person that Evan had never known and never really cared to learn about. Everything he knew about Connor was stuff that he made up and that he learned in passing from Connor's parents.
I will say I know which thing you're talking about, where he fell from the tree and that's how he met Connor. I'm more fine with that scene because I think it fits to the song. My issue with that is they did not present the imagery until like halfway through the song. He was just saying these things and then the imagery presented. If the imagery was, go ahead.
Or I was just gonna say it's exploitive at that point. Like once they bring it in, because it is pure. They purely did that, or it seems less for thematic or character reasons, but to draw a reaction from the audience. When it should always be, the goal is never to draw something from the audience. It is to give something to the audience that they can then draw from.
I completely agree. But yeah, that scene where like they're basically saying, oh, let's make up the story about how basically Connor wrote you a love letter. And then Connor singing about it, being happy, and just like interacting with Evan. Again, with the addition of poor transition, this was thrown at you out of nowhere. And it's such a gross scene. Like, I don't want to see somebody who committed suicide, we don't even know the reasons for, just suddenly like being used as kind of like a character.
Yeah, no, it is interesting that you bring that up because like that we don't really know why he did it. We're given hints throughout the film that he had issues with mental health. That's all we get, which I do understand the desire to not want to, because the story isn't necessarily about his suicide, it's about the aftermath. I understand that, but it's still not taking care to this very serious thing that people do actually deal with. And it is instead worrying far more about its own goals rather than the implications of said goals and storytelling that it's, using.
Exactly. Like, gosh, like we don't get to see any hint of what Connor was going through, what he was like, what his home life was like until towards the end of the movie where Evan finally like tries to get to know Connor. You would think like, hey, I'm lying about being his friend. Maybe I should like try to get to know him. No.
I'm going to be honest. I'm pretty sure that him trying to know Connor didn't come until after he told the truth.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That was
Yeah,
like towards the end of the movie.
he was already outed, and now he feels bad. He doesn't feel bad about it until it affects him.
Which goes into my final con of the movie, which I think is a good way to talk about how bad of a protagonist Evan is. Because I've heard he's kind of different in the original show.
From what I know, it's an interesting play. Like on stage and like the differences. Because once again, we're exclusively talking about the story presented in the movie. If anyone watching loves the play, we aren't talking about that. We don't know much about it. What I do know about it is that a lot of the presentation of the story and how effective it is depends on who is playing Evan Hansen and how they play him. Because I've heard from one of my friends that, I mean, their preference for Evan being played as not very sympathetic, like towards the end. Playing it as like not this misunderstood guy, but this creep who is unable to form, connections with people somehow, and decides to take advantage of a grieving family for those connections that he refuses to make himself. And with that, like, the presentation in this movie especially is unfortunate because they present Evan as someone, who is mentally ill. He takes pills for anxiety and depression. I mentioned this during the sync viewing when he mentioned the medication he takes is the same one that I take. So like they are presenting these issues very realistically and with some care in the beginning. It isn't until later on, once they're getting into the proper story, and Evan is doing these horrible things, but they are putting the burden of these horrible things that he is doing on his issues with mental health and how he's unable to form connections because of that. Instead of putting any of the burden on the miserable parents of both Connor and of Evan, and not dealing with the fact that, yes, maybe his mental illness plays some factor into why he would want to do this, but it doesn't play a factor into the fact that he is doing something that is truly sociopathic, and we should really delve into why he is doing that. That is beyond his mental illness, rather than just be like, oh, he takes pills, so he's gonna be a little wacky. Like, no.
Yeah, like I would rather watch a movie where the character Evan, like you said, is less sympathetic. Because if they wanted to use a story, they would have to make it revolve around a character who's not sympathetic, who's
Right.
making all these mistakes. Heck, I think one of the Star Avengers or somebody on Letterboxd, I can't remember, was like, hey, remember when we watched Kissing Booth 3 and we thought Elle was like the most toxic protagonist from the Kissing Booth series?
I still cannot believe how basically like Jonathan and Jay were saying the entire time, how is this worse than Kissing Booth 3?
I think it's worse than Kissing Booth 3 is because of how much they try to tackle mental health.
Yes.
While in Kissing Booth 3, it was just about like, yeah,
It was just
relationships don't work. Oh my gosh. So yeah, my final question.
Yes.
How do you think future movie adaptations of musicals are going to be in the future? Like, are they going to be continuing like Dear Evan Hansen's adaptation, or do you think it will get better?
Hollywood, this is interesting because we watched this film before it came out. It comes out on the day that we're filming this. So, it is hard to say because Hollywood, which is where these big, musicals are made, is a reactive place. It entirely depends on how well it does. I mean, the big reason that we've seen a resurgence in musicals is because of the popularity of things like La La Land and Hamilton, and how those broke into the mainstream. They make money, and the reactivity of Hollywood just means it made money. We're going to do that. It's also the same reason why every Marvel movie is basically the same, which doesn't make them bad, But it's the reason why. They have a formula. It makes money. They know it works. Why change it if it works? So I think it largely depends on the reaction of the audience to this and how much people go to see it, home sales, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my ideal of a perfect movie adaptation or like movie musical adaptation is actually, hiring cast members who maybe have experience with the characters like Broadway actors or finding actors who would fit the role perfectly. Not
Uh,
in the case of the era of Van Hansen where it's like, hey, Ben Platt. Oh god.
but like something that I had mentioned earlier was In the Heights, and In the Heights did just that. Anthony Ramos, had experience on Broadway in Lin-Manuel stories. Plenty of the other actors and even background people had experience in musicals and Broadway. And you see how well that turned out. That movie is absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant. But this, on the other hand, like, look, I love Amy Adams to death. I don't know how much she should be in an adaptation of a stage play or a stage musical specifically. And the same goes with Caitlin Dever, Julianne Moore. Like, it works better when you have that tone. But even beyond that, it still could have worked if they had any care for cinematic translation rather than just being like, so we're going to sit you down, you're going to stare at your son, you're going to sing for 3 minutes, and we're going to have the camera be stationary and static and cut to you as if you are just talking to him. This is a musical and action. I don't understand it.
Yeah, because I remember I think Jay brought this up while we were watching is how the colors in the movie look so bland and like how they just kept it on one person during the musical segments. And I'm like, you're based off a Broadway musical. You can do more with your setting, surroundings, and
Absolutely.
actors.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like with that, like looking at something like La La Land, which is an original movie musical, was never on the stage, has more, weirdly enough, stage presence than this adaptation of a Broadway show. Because there is, the choreography is all in camera. The camera's fluid, moving around all the time. It's always in one shot. The musical segments, the sequences. Um, Evan Hansen has none of that. It feels like it's shot like a traditional TV drama, weirdly enough, rather than using the gift that it is, being a musical, to have some fun with it. The closest example it got to that was in that song we mentioned earlier, Sincerely Me, where they were cutting between a bunch of different, places and locations and activities. Despite the fact that the surrounding context of it is gross, that seems to be the only time they at least tried, hence why I think it's probably the best sequence in the movie from a musical technical level, even though it is incredibly gross from a moral and contextual one.
Yeah, I think like what they could have done, like the Sincerely Me sequence, maybe like have everyone either frozen or even disappeared
Mm-hmm.
from the background and just focus on the singer and like him interacting with the environment. That would have been like something captivating, not just them standing in one spot.
Or like in the I'm forgetting the word for high school for some reason, but high school. Uh, in the high school sequences, for some reason, their regular motif to cut back to was I am walking through a hallway, sad and singing. There isn't even any slow motion. I'm just walking through a hallway, sad and singing. No one is doing anything around me but normal high school things. This looks like a made-for-TV cop show, and it's confusing because there's so much more avenues you could go for that rather than just doing the blatantly most lazy and uninteresting thing you possibly could have with that. You could have had lockers closing to the beat. You could have had them moving along and, they every time they cut to a different line, someone walks in front of the camera and they're in a different place in the school. There's so many options you had there, but instead it's just a standard dolly shot moving backwards, moving backwards. That's it.
Can't believe I'm saying this, but could we have gotten Kenny Ortega to just come work on Dear Evan Hansen and make it look like High School Musical?
Okay, look, people bash on High School Musical, but those things have legitimately good musical sequences. So I don't know about anything else in those movies. I haven't seen them since I was a kid. But like they have legitimately good musical sequences.
No, I agree. Like when Brad and I were talking about the Kissing Booth movies, we mentioned how High School Musical is a more engaging teenage drama movie. And it's like it's a musical. And even then, me and Brandon were like, hey, if we ever rewatch those movies, we might do another collaboration of them.
We have to do like a
Because
full
I rewatched them.
viewing of the whole trilogy.
I mean, I am down for that. I mean, I basically watched the first three High School Musical movies because I was babysitting, and all my girls who are like 5 and 2 wanted to watch them. I didn't watch those until I was like a little older than them. So the fact that they wanted to watch it at their age, that's pretty incredible.
They're good movies. People are mean to
They
them.
are. All right. I think that covers everything we have to say about the movie. It's just, yeah, it is my least favorite 2021 movie. It is one of my least favorite movies just because of how much it ticked me off.
It's truly remarkable how this got made. It's especially frustrating in that way because we had mentioned this a few times when we were watching it. There is a way that this story could be told, and it could be impactful and powerful and well done. This simply was not it. This was lazy, manipulative, exploitive, and it did not have any real care for the issues that it was bringing up. I can't say anything for how the stage musical does it, but the film, at least, that's just kind of how it is.
All right, Jackson. So you and me, we're gonna get Broadway tickets. We're gonna go see Dear Evan Hansen.
Absolutely not. I'm just gonna look up a slime tutorial of Dear Evan Hansen. Watch it that way on YouTube.
Gotcha. All right. So yeah, my rating for this movie definitely a 0.5 out of 5 stars. Horrendous movie. What about you, Jackson?
I gave it a 1 out of 5, 1 star out of 5 because songs were good. Cast besides Ben Platt was decent, and I don't know. Also, the fact that it ended, get an extra half-star for not entirely wasting my time.
Thank you for coming here and talking about the movie with me.
Of course.
All right, Jackson, is there any like social media links or anything that people can find you on?
There's Instagram, which you can find me at Jackson T. Hendrix, Letterboxd, where you can read my review of Dear Evan Hansen, where I call it my Joker origin story, at Jackson Hendrix. Or if you're interested in getting me for any voiceover work, you can find me on Casting Call Club under the name Jackson Hendrix.
And you know what? I'm gonna do a shout out to my friend Jay and Brandon. They have started a podcast called Cinema Exposure where they talk about all the new films. There's always something to talk about, I believe. Did they recently do American Beauty? I feel like I missed out on that one.
They did just recently do American Beauty. I think right now the next up on the docket is Dune, the David Lynch film.
Oh, right, because I think they had Jonathan on that episode. So yeah, I'll put in the links to their podcast pages. I really recommend it because I even viewed American Beauty for the first time with them for their podcast, and that was experience. All right. I will hopefully see you guys next time.